It began with a word. For the better part of 2 decades, one of the best coaches rugby has ever seen has been hounded by 3 simple syllables. One word causing him more pain than all the window cleaning in the world. Because wherever Warren Gatland goes, one word follows. Warrenball. Warrenball was a term coined by then London Irish director of rugby Brian Smith in the early noughties, whose then close rivals London Wasps were on the brink of a 5th major title under the stewardship of everyone's favourite white-haired head honcho who looked absolutely no different if animated by Pixar. And good Alan Wynne-Jones has the term stuck. It pretty much just means big lads smashing it up over the gain line over and over again, turgid rugby with little imagination but plenty of physicality. And it's one that the man himself hates so much you'd think it was Scottish. Are we still doing the Scotland joke? Are we still doing that? It was never really true in the first place, but it's especially not true now. Should we replace it? We should probably do something else. Should we say Irish? Let's say Irish. He hates so much you'd think it was Irish. Well, the Warren in question is currently tasked with one of the toughest assignments he'll ever get. This summer, Mr. Gatland takes the British and Irish Lions to South Africa, seeking to overthrow the world champions on their own turf, trying to take apart a team who physically demolished everything before them in the run-up to creating one of the most iconic moments in rugby history. And yet, the expectation, the idea, the word remains. The world watches and the world expects Warrenball. Chonko boys charging at the gain line, hoping Peter Steph the Toy won't do anything about it, working side to side and wondering whether Damien Diolande will just soften up in the tackle once, for a laugh. I'm here to tell you right now, the 2021 Lions will not play, quote-unquote, Warrenball. Which begs one question now. Everything I'm about to say is speculation, but it's speculation based on a solid 2 months of poring over every possible hint Gatland might have left us in interviews or past performances, how his coaching team have attacked in the past, and every time the Springboks have shown something that may potentially be considered like a possible weakness. So, the question, just how will Warren Gatland's British and Irish Lions team attack the Springboks this summer? And let's start with that sentence, because whilst this is very much Warren Gatland's British and Irish Lions team, the 2021 game plan will come from 2 disparate sources. Gatland is a personality famous for his loyalty, and on the previous 2 tours, he took Bookie's favourite Rob Howley as his attack coach, his right-hand man with Wales. This time, Gatland has reached outside his immediate surroundings and plucked Scotland boss and owner of the world's clean-shaven chin that looks the most like a soul patch, Gregor Townsend, to be his number 2 and take charge of the attack. Whereas Warren is famous for sending Jamie Roberts up the middle, typical Gregor Townsend rugby looks more like this.
Oh, Russell! Oh, it works now! Hugh Jones in the open, and Hugh Jones is alone, looking for Seymour. Hugh Jones goes himself. Johnny May gets to him, but Scotland suddenly into the England 22. Ryan Wilson feeds on. Barkley looks for support. Laidlaw, wide it goes. McInally through the middle. McInally still going. Farrell gets him down. And Scotland within metres of the line. Out wide. It comes to Maitland for the try.
Townsend is very interesting as a selection because he's almost certainly the most consistent attack coach in Europe, instead of being the most creative. Now, for nearly 10 years, teams playing under Townsend have been celebrated for their brand of rugby without ever being found out. Whereas someone like Stephen Jones with Wales, or even Franco Smith with Italy, tries to look into the future and work out how teams will be playing in 5-10 years' time, Townsend is just a tinkerer. He tweaks and changes the same game plan slowly over time. If you look back on how his Glasgow side played in 2014, it's essentially the same brand of rugby as his 2021 Scotland team, namely moving between forward carries quickly so Finn Russell can lob a miracle ball over the top, except the detail of positioning the forwards, the way they carry, the way they approach the breakdown, have changed massively with the times. Since he took over Glasgow in 2012, his attack has never once become predictable or easy for someone to defend. Townsend is the master of tweaking just before everyone works out how they're going to stop him. It's this tweaking Gatland will want, because the second point of that previous sentence is crucial. This is a team whose sole purpose is to attack the Springboks. It's not a World Cup where you need to build a perfect game that can break down any opposition. A Lions tour is about targeting one team and one team only, and finding enough ways to do it that you can beat them 3 times. It just so happens for this tour, that team is South Africa, owners of the best defence in the world, marshalled by their now head coach Jacques Nienaber. Instead of trying to build an attack that is timeless, Gatland will be hoping Townsend can tweak the structure he built for Scotland into one that can open up a world-class defence. So before we get into it much further, it's worth asking, what are the key elements of South African defence, and why is it different to what Lions players might be used to facing in Europe? The defence Jacques Nienaber has built is remarkable because it's a high-risk, high-reward type system where himself and his pal with the gold-plated penis have found ways to chop out the risk whilst keeping the rewards until it's about 95-97% foolproof. The key twist from the kind of modern defence most test teams play is the way they blitz from out to in instead of in to out. Most sides try to press you out towards the touchline. The Springboks try to press you back in field. Most sides are most aggressive in the middle, the Boks most aggressive out wide. This looks kind of like this. The team spreads as thin as possible to allow the winger, Kolbe, Mapimpi and Kose to take position as wide as they can get, essentially giving them a view from the stands of how the attack is aligning. This allows the winger to read and identify the play and shoot in to take out whoever's the key man in the attack, whether it's the guy giving the vital pass, the guy who's receiving and making the decision, rather than drifting out to cover. The quickest guy just gets in there. Whether he makes a tackle or not is irrelevant. He just has to stop the play rather than drifting to cover. This is a part of the South African defence the Lions will try to exploit, and all the coaches involved have tried to do it at least once in the past. Here, off of Scrum 5, Gatland's Wales swap number 8 Ross Moriarty to the flank with Ellis Jenkins, who's played Scrum half in the past with Cardiff Blues, in at the base to deliver a quicker, cleaner pass, with 10 Anscombe and winger George North behind the scrum here, instead of in the more standard positions would be like here and here. Fullback Liam Williams takes North's position on the touchline. Now, the Boks defence wants Dianti here to hit the key player in the move, so Wales want to make it impossible for him to identify who that will be. Jenkins delivers a clean ball to Gareth Davis, who drifts into the 10 channel to fix Pollard. Parker's line just takes a moment of Dianti's time and attention, meaning he's later onto Anscombe. All this Welsh movement is just about buying Anscombe as many seconds as he can possibly get, so he can make his decision on whether to pass to North or to Williams after Dianti has made his decision whether he's going to tackle North or Williams, who he's going to watch. The winger is drawn to North like he's a banned substance, and Anscombe can put Sanjay in to score in the corner. I wouldn't be surprised, right, if the Lions run literally this move if they get a 5-metre scrum, but with Stuart Hogg in for George North as the kind of big name that draws the defender's eyes away. However, from open play, the Springboks have many failsafes. One of them is to focus on the breakdown. Watch how they use the 3rd or 4th man out here to shoot up between the ball carrier and their support. Sure, this cuts off a passing lane, but it also makes it more difficult for the support to arrive at the ruck. They've got a big burly dude to run around in order to get there and help out their mate who's just been smashed by another big burly dude. 7 of the likely starting pack, plus Damien Delande and even Billy the Roo, are proper breakdown threats, meaning someone is always on hand to at very least slow the ball, if not turn it over. So it becomes interesting that Lions have not attempted to fight fire with water in those big grey blankets that they use, which is what ruck-based monsters like CJ Stander, Sam Underhill and Josh Navidi would have been. Players that are so good at the breakdown they can negate any threat. None of those three are in the squad. Instead, Gatland's picked a back row that is quick and wiry. They're players who like to have the ball in their hands, who play best in space. And this all plays into telling us more about the shape Gatland and Townsend will likely implement, because they want to get the ball away from that kind of zone that South Africa can cut off from the support. And it shouldn't be tricky to put that shape into place. Since getting back from the World Cup, Wales, Scotland and Ireland have all very shamelessly adopted an attacking shape known as the 1-3-2-2. Well, Wales are shameless. Ireland and Scotland have plenty of reasons to associate it with shame and dark days, because this is an attacking pattern they've all stolen from 2019's glorious and much beloved Japan team. The 1-3-2-2 was a tactic Japan coach Jamie Joseph pioneered as a way of getting go forward with a smaller pack. The numbers 1, 3, 2 and 2 correspond to where on the field, width-wise, he placed his 8 forwards. 1 forward would stick to the blindside wing, 3 would group together in the middle of the pitch, and then we'd have 2 groups of 2 wider out. One of them about here and the other one right out on the wing. The backs then filtered around them, with fly half Utamura guiding the ball between these 4 segments and selecting which group was in the most space or who should crash it up so they can attack the space outside them the following phase. This structure is a twist on a shape every team near enough was playing at the time, which used 2 of their pack as what's known as edge forwards. This is what it says on the very meaty tin. It's 2 forwards, usually a hooker and a back rower, hanging out on either wing, with the other 6 big lads split into 2 groups in midfield. This shape became standard instead of stand out, and soon enough every defence just learned to identify the 3-man pod of biggest carriers and how to smash the shit out of them. Japan's system was ingenious and worked for a number of reasons. 1, it used that knowledge against their opposition. Here, the Irish forwards fixate on the pod of 3, wanting to stop their biggest carriers, but Tamura instead hits the 2-man group who are hitting a line, sending tight-head Jiwon-gu, the least likely carrier, through the gap between Irish forwards and backs. Their structure was built so every forward was running at unexpected shoulders or better yet gaps in the defence, and was able to use their impressive skill set. The likes of Hooker Horie, Locke Thompson, and the full back row had hands so soft a working class dad would never forgive them, and the 1-3-2-2 system allowed the whole team to link up in one movement. The 1-3-3-1 shape that most teams were running wasn't really built to get the ball from one of those 4 numbers to the next, but Japan could easily spill between forward units without ever needing a single back. That's the dream there, that's the forward's dream. This, and the dual forwards on the wing for clearing out and generating quick ball, allowed Japan to play wide to wide, fast, and pick holes wherever they may appear. This was a sublime means of getting the most out of a smaller pack. But, as they queued up to leave Tokyo Haneda Airport, about 8,000 attack coaches from all over the world all had the same idea in unison. What if we tried that, but with big lads? So, 4.5 of the current top 8 teams in the world now play a variation on the 1-3-2-2 pattern. Everyone thought Japan both pioneered and perfected it, but now everyone's got a different take. Ireland and Scotland have essentially approached the same idea from totally different angles. Both view it as something rigid, but whereas Scotland use it as something to play off, Ireland see it as something to play within. Whereas the wild forward carries were most of Japan's game, Scotland, in true Townsend fashion, used the shape as a flashy new tweak to get going forward so Finn Russell can do all of his bullshit passes. Tooney never changes. Ireland instead used the shape to make sure their play didn't get too out of hand. You know, it just holds them back a bit. Each of the 1, the 3 and the 2-2s running far more hard and direct. Think of it like Scotland use it as a skeleton, Ireland use it as a tent. I have no idea what the material you could use to make both of those is, but you can probably only find it in Wakanda. Wales, on the other hand, were also using it as a skeleton, but whereas Scotland are like, hey cool, let's use the skeleton to do some neat skateboard tricks. Wales are like, I'm going to use the skeleton as a chance to evolve a 3rd arm and 6 extra knees. Now, Alliance Tour probably isn't the time to experiment as wildly as Wales have under Stephen Jones, but I think there's a couple of his evolutions that Townsend may take on board. When Japan took on the Springboks in the World Cup, they found sometimes all the innovation on earth can't help a small pack if the big boys defend smartly. The Boks did this in 2 main ways. 1, they weren't just going to target the biggest carriers, they were going to annihilate them. Kazuki Himeno, Japan's key and best player in the pool stage, averaged an insane 4.5 metres per carry across the 4 games of the pool stage. He managed 16 metres from 12 carries in the quarter-final, thanks to tackles like this by everyone's favourite pug in a wig, Faf de Klerk, absolutely blitzing up to hit him before he catches the ball. 2, they shifted their usual defence to really heavy blitz in the 13 channel. This was rarely Lucanio himself, more often the heftier Diolande or a forward such as Diego here to try and get a dominant shot on. This is something the Lions are going to need to watch out for, but it's something Wales may have found a way around. The 1-3-2-2 normally just refers to the forwards, the backs being an entirely separate entity, but Wales and the PVAC have melded the 2 into one. We regularly saw centres fill in where we might see a prop, allowing for a very different kind of carry, or Justin Tipuric sliding into the fly half position, behind his fellow ruck boys. This Lions squad favours fast, dynamic forwards, the kind who can unanimously deliver that crisp pass Ellis Jenkins did off the base. These can slot neatly into the edge forward role Faletau played during the Six Nations, but as I discussed in my video on the squad itself, it grants an opening in the centres, where the likes of Bundyaki and Robbie Henshaw may be expected to smash up the ball in a role you'd normally expect of a number 8, slotting into the 1-3-2-2 structure the Lions may well run, and allowing Tipuric or Faletau to operate in a very different role for strike plays or 3rd, 4th, 10th phase, not just 1st. However, Faletau wasn't the only out-wide revelation we saw at the Six Nations. Against Scotland and England, Ireland moved Octopus and a scrum cap, Tyke Byrne, out the wing, and it transformed how they play. Tadhg Beirne is a phenomenal all-round rugby player, but his biggest attributes are these two bastards coming out of his shoulders. Now, as normal human being arm, right, has 6 points of articulation. Tadhg Beirne, I'm pretty sure, has somewhere around 38, spread across approximately 4 miles of spindled out flesh. Anything in rugby that requires arms, Tadhg Beirne is exceptional at. Stealing lineouts, contesting a breakdown, passing, catching, offloading, legs, torso, upper body strength, whatever, sure, grand, fine. Arms? Oh boy, look out, Tadhg's in town. So this was just what he added. Handling has always been a great attribute of his, but 3 seasons at Wayne Pivac Scarlets really turned it into second nature for him, and so a pass like this in the wide channel is pretty common shit. And when slotting in as part of a wider 2-man group, as a defender, wrapping up Beirne's ball-carrying arm is like trying to put a skipping rope in a crisp packet, and he can find a way, of course, to get the ball away. This continuity was great for unleashing CJ Stander and squad member Jack Conan, but just imagine how a pacey number 8 like Faletau or Simmons could do. Whilst Beirne roams more defensively, not to get stuck in the same position, it does also put him in a perfect place to use his breakdown nous and win turnovers when, such as this, he's chasing box kicks that happen down the tram lines. We might see Beirne out on the wing primarily, we might see him and Faletau as a combo in that wider 2-man group, or we might see them chop and change. That would mirror what Gatland did in 2017, where he played Faletau as an edge forward in the first 2 tests, trying to use his pace, power, and let's not lie, flawless ability to finish, then come test 3, anticipating a tighter contest, moved him inwards and put a Toje on the flank. This allowed him to utilise Faletau's handling in field, whilst Toje's, also long arms, created some continuity, he did this kind of thing, but it's primarily about efficiency. The All Blacks had reinforced their midfield after some gain line struggles in the second test, so the Lions looked to play crash balls wider, and Toje was superb, clearing out, having him in the wide channels meant they were almost guaranteed quick ball when they got there. Alan Wynne-Jones has been playing a similar role for Wales this year, combining his ability to offload with his tireless work rate now on the wing. Whereas 4 years ago, teams would change up the formation between games, rugby has moved itself forward, and we'll probably see the Lions deploying both of these kind of tactics at different stages of the game, depending on what they want out of the play. If we see a Toje or Alan Wynne out wide, they're likely looking to shift the point of focus, try and get some gain line success in areas containing decidedly fewer Damien D'Alandes. If we see Tadhg Beirne, they're looking to play expansively. If we see Faletau, they're probably looking to play fast. If we see both of those two, we may well be seeing tries. In the documentary I want to call excellent but can't because for some reason I'm in it, Chasing the Sun, Rassie Erasmus describes facing Gatland's 2019 Wales team as possibly the most challenging task of his entire coaching career, because here was a team with nothing to analyse, a team with no weaknesses. Every other nation, you can identify what they do well and how to counteract it. Japan had an irresistible attack once it got going forward, so you stop them going forward. England like to play fast, so you slow them down. But Wales' one real strength was their patience. They do nothing for 65 minutes. They'd wait and wait and wait until you made a mistake, possibly out of boredom, and then they'd take the chance almost every single time. And old 80-inch himself had to ask, how the hell do you exploit a team famous for their patience? Rassie realised the only way to deal with that level of patience was to match it. Andre Pollard regarded that game as the most fascinating, tactically fraught game of his career, having to deliberately not play the kind of rugby his brain was often telling him to play. For example, Josh Adams here is flat, so LaRue figures there's space in behind, but the whole Welsh defence knows halfpenny's on his way, so the ball is covered comfortably without any of them breaking a sweat. Or here, Davis shoots up to cut off options, and Wales open a small gap between Parks and Alan Wynne to tempt Faf, allowing the pair to pincer in on the isolated scrum half, and Parks to rip the ball after he's left on his own. The Boks' patience picked up in the second half as they became wise to these and more willing to wait and work for the penalty, one of which eventually won them the match. I'm really sorry for showing this again in Welsh. It's no easy for me. I had to watch this game again. I'm really sorry. Erasmus has said himself he doesn't anticipate 3 repeats of the even-handed arm wrestle in Yokohama. He thinks the Lions will come with a wider, more Scottish game, but if Warrenball means anything, and that is a genuine question we could get into, does it mean anything? It means playing rugby that's not worried about the performance, about looking dominant, about chaining together 16 passes or finishing off the try of the season. It's about scoring more points than the other team across 80 minutes and literally nothing else. It's about that patience. And whilst the fancy 1-3-2-2 Gregor Townsend antics chasing bullshit will be the headline attraction, it's all going to be built on this. The undercurrent, the core that the team can revert back to at any point. You could call the way Wales played in 2019 a plan B, but it's more like two plans baked into each other. It's a Warrenball Wales 2019 base game with loads of fun, crafty Gregor Townsend DLC. Over the run-up to 2019, Warren Gatland became the Tier 1 coach most reliant on analysis, and unsurprisingly, he's taken the bulk of his Welsh looking at the screen and going, hey cool, this guy kicks weird team with him. Vinnie Hammond and Gavin Vaughan, who both have very right-hand man relationships with Andy Farrell and Gregor Townsend respectively. Of the 10 tries Wales scored in the 2019 Grand Slam campaign, 4 of which came from moments of individual brilliance by the wingers, and it was always the wingers, but 5 of the other 6 were direct results of analysis on the opposition. Ireland putting a scrum half and wingers and the defensive line in their own 22 and the fullback out wide, leaving this 5-metre dead zone behind the defensive line. So comes the only try in the finale match. France's wingers play cat and mouse, starting flat but sliding back along the touchline if the opposition attempted the kick. Parks puts a ball in field, meaning Johan Uge, the only man with enough big dick energy to make Rassie Erasmus glance downwards, is at the very least conceding a 5-metre scrum here, not expecting to be so far away from the touchline. And the one exception, the only try Wales scored by breaking someone down through pattern play, kind of proves the rule. It's a 40-phase score where all 15 players touch the ball, knowing this is an England team whose biggest weakness is their patience, a team who want to break your spirit instantly and get worse and worse the longer you stay in the fight. And Gatland found fascinating ways to take this to the box. For starters, Wales' kicking game in that semi-final was phenomenally smart. The Springboks kicked to keep up their forward momentum, Wales kicked to suspend it. The Welsh kicks were rarely about space or even territory. They were traps. They were into space where they thought the Springboks would kick it back, allowing them to try and make a net game because of how shallow Faf de Klerk often kicks, a sacrifice made to improve the quality of the chase. Or better yet, they're into space where they thought the Springboks might run it back, with back rows and turnover threats waiting. They'd run moves such as this, in the hope Winger and Kosi might break the pre-arranged system to try and cover man and ball. A Springbok is a prey animal, and Gatland spent 80 minutes laying bait. For all the contrast between Gatland and Townsend tactics, they also had one thing in common when last playing South Africa: set-piece attacks and trick plays. This is not an analysis that will surprise anyone, but Rassie Erasmus puts quite a lot of focus on the set piece. When it's going on, the scrum or line-out is the be-all, end-all, and it usually results in them getting the be-all, the ball. It's rare for the Bok pack to break off early to defend, and both coaches figured this was something they could attack. When they last played in 2019, Scotland launched an elaborate pre-called move off first or second phase on 6 of their first 8 line-outs or scrums. Likewise, in that semi-final, Wales ran a huge number of players designed to catch the Boks short. This, for example, tries to exploit the winger shooting up to open the gap inside him, and could have created a try had the ball to halfpenny not drifted forward. But this play by Scotland is far more effective. Now, I think this move is supposed to look something like this: playing on the fact Creel will try to blitz in on Russell and trusting him to deliver a crisp pass to Maitland on the wraparound, who can then get it wide to Hogg and Seymour on the wing. It's a simple move, but it still goes wrong. Creel does try to blitz Russell, and he did a pretty bloody good job of it too, causing him to rush the pass and leave Hogg to pick up the pieces. However, the key part of this move isn't executing cleanly, it's getting it into the wide channel, because Scotland aren't just thinking first phase. Setting up a ruck here allows them to play wide to wide, wing to wing. Hamish Watson works across and cleans superbly, surviving a hell of an attack on the ball by Khaleesi. And in the meantime, 13 Scots set up. The majority of moves designed to exploit the South African defence are about the point of difference itself, the outside blitz, the out to win. But this, by Townsend, is ingenious because it targets instead the failsafe. Just as we see here, the Boks are okay with you spinning it wide, because once the ball passes them, each of their backs turn and sprint towards the touchline to cover, just in case the attack does get by. Their press is so aggressive and the whole 15's work rate so high, even getting outside them normally results in just being stopped on the gain line. So Townsend looks to exploit that to use the Boks' own work rate against them. Creel shoots in on Russell, and then the other 4 backs not in the backfield or leg it across to cover Hogg and Seymour. This means once the ball is leaving the ruck, the Boks backs are tied up here, and the defensive line itself is made up solely of forwards finding their shape after the scrum. These are pretty phenomenal forwards we're talking about, however, so Malcolm Marks here does a frankly pretty exceptional job of operating in the 13 role and buys enough time for Jesse Creel to get back into line, but it's only Creel. Creel's the only one who can get across. The others are all trapped on the far side. 2 passes, and Scotland have got outside the South defence. None of these players are able to make the tackle, meaning it's a 4-on-2 as Creel gets committed and Hugh Jones has sex with every member of the crowd's eyes. Papier and Dutoy work incredibly hard, so hard, in order to try and make this as hard as possible for Scotland, but the Scotch backline are sensational in open play and managed to convert through old channel favourite Peter Bloody Horn. Alright, Pete, it's been a while. Haven't seen you in a while. How are you doing, Peter Bloody Horn? Good to see you. But beyond set-piece type ideas, one game this Six Nations really gave us an idea hidden in plain sight as to how Townsend might adapt and how the Lions might attack. A titanic occasion that gave us perfect prep to tinker ahead of taking on new neighbour. This game was perhaps the biggest game of the Six Nations in a Lions context, and it was, obviously, Scotland against Italy. Now, most test teams of late have adopted the twist on one of 3 or 4 different defensive systems, all putting their own stank on it. Wales's defence is like England's but less aggressive. Ireland's is like France's but more aggressive. And Italy's is like South Africa's but shit. Whereas all the other teams of the Six Nations blitz in to out towards the touchline, Italy borrowed South Africa's system of blitzing out to in, working back in towards the ruck. Scotland generally attack 1, maybe 2 passes at a time, until it's time to pull the trigger and let Finn do his mad shit. He loves some mad shit, does Finn. The ball rarely moves beyond the second receiver, but it leaves the resulting ruck so fast it creates the illusion of greater movement, whilst also tying in tacklers. Against Italy, and their very specific out to in defence, Scotland adapted, playing 3-4 passes regularly, and allowing them to twist Italy about, instead of being blindsided. Instead of forwards near the ruck, an increasing amount of their carrying was done by the centres, which very much lines up with the ideas I talked about from Wales before and the surprise inclusion of Bundy Archie, a guy primarily known for his commitment to wham bam thank you mamming. This split the Italian defence, who couldn't charge as a line or use their power forwards to seize momentum, which is what they did in the, maybe 4 or 5 good defensive sets they had over the Six Nations. This, in turn, made it more difficult for the backs to track across and cover as per the plan, as there's now a ruck between them and the touchline they want to push towards. Morey here blitzes out of line from the 13 channel, but Scotland can't exploit the hole this opens up because the other Italians have flooded across like so. However, that isn't a problem. The Scottish ball is so fast, Italy haven't fully set. In an Andy Farrell style system, Garbisi still finding his positioning here in the 13 channel wouldn't be a problem as he's got until the ball gets wide to find his feet. But here, instead, he has to get outside so he can then target the man back inside. He has to leave the house so that he can lock the door, so to speak. Of course, the Springboks are infinitely better at setting in these situations, but Scotland really opened Italy up by playing wide to wide and baking a support runner into each move, all obviously hitting exactly where the defender blitzing would have been. The principle of how you get through the Springbok and Italian defence is the same. And whilst you need to be about 8,000, maybe more than that, probably more than 8,000% better to open up South Africans, this game just highlighted the more dynamic and unpredictable the carry, the greater a knock-on effect it can have over the next few phases. As such, this introduced some ambiguity into how the Lions may launch this attack. My initial feeling on seeing this squad was this is a team built to play off 9. All 3 scrum halves love to throw this wide ball, outside the aligned forwards to a back row centre or, in Ali Price's case, Gareth Davis, sprinting onto it. And all 3 10 selected are, for their cosmetic differences, the same sort of 10. They're fly halves who assess the game and then make the necessary interventions. Whether it's a long touch finder from Bigger, a coke-addled Hail Mary from Russell, or an angry Father's Day card from Farrell, it's the same prospect. They're 10s who pick their moments, especially inside the 22. None of them are a 10 in the mould of Richie Mwanga, George Ford or Paolo Garbisi, who like to let the energy of the game flow through them, who are always hands-on even when they're not touching the ball. Now, my 25-minute circle jerk on George Ford goes into this idea in more detail, but those 3 10s are all about trying to build a game that propels itself forward, where the phase play is its own reward and the thing that'll get you over the line, where after 15 phases you make enough ground off the nuts and bolts that you don't need a cross kick or a class pass. The options the Lions have selected are, instead, the kind who like to work 15 phases to create a moment that you might be able to exploit, a moment where you need that kick, where you need a chip, where you need a lovely, ridiculous pass, a moment where the Springbok defence might be weakened or slower to set. It's like, instead of using the copper they were given as a conductive metal, Gatland has fashioned it into an axe. And as such, the Lions probably will see the ball flick through the fly-off's hands less than you'd expect. But when they do it, they'll make it count. The 10's job isn't to load the bullets and take aim, it's just to keep their finger on the trigger and know when to pull. Interestingly, the 2 fly halves South Africa have used under Erasmus have been one of either mould. Elton Yankees, a brilliant conductor, and Pollard, about as sharp an axe as you'll find. But when it got to the knockouts, they dropped Yankees, relinquishing the option we'd seen South Africa use in the past of bringing Yankees on to change up how the Boks use their carriers, the energy, the style of the crash-ups becoming so much more dynamic. Because the 6-2 bomb squad idea was so effective, I wonder if Warren has forgotten Elton Yankees, who, contrary to popular belief amongst fans, is an extremely good rugby player, is a possible ace up South Africa's sleeve if the Lions' defence ever gets on top? That question of the defence remains an interesting one, and one even I'd struggle to make baseless speculation on until the Lions actually play Japan on the 26th of June, so close. It's possible they want to run Scotland's defence, it's possible Steve Tandy is there to marshal and manage the same kind of 14-man line system they ran in 2017 under Andy Fowle until he arrives 1 week before the test to take over, because ultimately, all of this, right, it's just speculation. I'd like to think it's well-researched and educated speculation. I've certainly watched enough games back in detail, but it's enormous levels of logical guesswork to try and work out how Warren Gatland might take on what is probably the biggest challenge of his career. One that could only get more intimidating if the Springboks dirty up the windows of the coach's box but leave him a bucket and sponge. Because so much as the world expects Warrenball, what they're really anticipating in every sense of the word is a free test series that win, lose, or somehow once again draw we'll still be talking about in 24 years' time. The 2009 tour was the moment I went from someone who watches Wales play with their family to, well, someone who's fascinated enough by the mechanics of the top-level game that I spent almost 2 months putting together a video like this. This tour, 12 years on, has the chance to top it. To define what rugby is and can be, not just for the 60-something players who will be involved, but for generations watching it at home. This is a tour that's not about the nitty-gritty. It's about the way it'll be executed with ferocity, passion, and such excitement. It might have been started by the word Warrenball, but I think it's those words we'll be thinking when we look back on this in 24 years' time. Thank you for watching that. I hope you enjoyed it. As I said, there's a lot of work that's gone into that. There's been a couple of months of going over as much as I possibly can. Thank you to everyone that's supported on Patreon, that you make this kind of thing possible. It's kind of proper deep dive, really heavy analysis. You make them possible. Appreciate it enormously. If you happen to have more money to spare, I am doing an event for Doddy Weir's charity. My name is Doddy5. On Friday night, the Dodmaster, as it's known, for the Scottish Rugby blog, Scottish Rugby podcast, is a kind of rugby take on Taskmaster. There's a bunch of people, including myself, Lee from Blood and Mud. There's a load of people out there doing it. It should be a lot of fun. It's going to be live from 8:30 on the Scottish Rugby podcast's website, their blog. If you want to go and look at their Facebook page, the links on social media, etc., you can see it there. Additionally, if you like the sound of the 2009 Lions tour and think, I wish someone would talk about that at some length, I'm doing a mini podcast series on the 2009 Lions tour, going back over it retrospectively. If you want to search whatever podcast device you use for the Squid Rugby Lions tour retrospective, there's also episodes of every game from the 2011 World Cup, and then the 2009 Lions tour will be running alongside this tour, as well as once the tour gets going itself in just a few days' time now, I'll be covering each game as they happen, as well as many of the other test matches from around the world as I possibly can, as the Springboks, as Australia play France, as all kinds of things whir back into life in rugby. So, I'll see you then. It's almost time, finally, for the Lions.
Good. No, you're crossing.